Hello, today we're going to discuss culturing yogurt. There are lots of different techniques out on the internet. I encourage you to look at whatever materials you have on hand and put it together. The one thing before I start is the ingredient. Almost every person that I have seen discuss this on the internet says you have to use whole milk. You do not have to use whole milk. Powdered milk cultures very well. I have here powdered milk from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints cannery. It's open to the public. Anyone can buy it. This is excellent milk, and it's made with a low heat process, so it doesn't taste cooked. Using things that you already have on hand that are shelf stable make a lot of sense to me now in this uncertain world. So my goal is, in this container, this will be the yogurt incubator, and in this container I'm going to put a total of 14 cups of warm water along with 4 cups of powdered milk solids. This recipe will make a gallon of yogurt. There are only 2 of us that I cook for, and we have no problem going through that yogurt in a month's time. Yogurt is very stable in the refrigerator after it's cultured, so I don't worry about it. So I'll show you how I'm doing this. I've measured 4 cups of hot water. This does better if it's reconstituted in hot water. And notice we've skipped a whole step from using whole milk, because you no longer have to put it in a pot and heat it up to near boiling and then let it cool. This is directly finished after it's through with the blender. So I'm going to show you emptying, but I'm not going to count it. Remember, what I'm going to get is a total of 4 cups of milk solids into 14 cups of water. Our first cup goes in before I start the blender. I only like to pulse it about 12 times, so I count slowly to 12 and stop. Actually, it's not that slow, and why you're doing it just barely the minimum is because you don't want an excess of bubbles. So here's my first 4 cups with 1 cup water in it. So I will repeat this 3 more times, with the last one being 2 cups of warm water instead of 4. So I just count it in my mind, because believe me, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this step. This is the most time-consuming part of it. The rest of the time, you're just waiting for the yogurt to culture. Okay, here's my second cup, and a quick, well, let's say 12. This part isn't terribly scientific, but it does keep the bubbles down, because if you have an excess of bubbles, you'll still have them when you're through with the culture. If the bubbles aren't quite so intense, it'll be a better culture. Okay. We're now on 3. Now here I'm going to go, that has been 12 cups of water I've measured in. Now I'm going to go just to 2. And this yogurt, this is going to be a little different. I'm going to put the 1 cup in. This is my 4th cup of yogurt. There's one more ingredient, and I'll get that out of the refrigerator and discuss it in a minute. Our 3rd ingredient, if you count the water, is yogurt starter. You can use any yogurt out of the supermarket that you'd like to start your culture, and after that you can reuse the culture that you are eating from, as long as it's plain yogurt, no flavorings, not even vanilla, and it needs to say live and active cultures. If it doesn't have that, then it's not going to work. You need that live culture. So you can buy it in a small amount. This happens to be the one that we could find at Winco. And so I'm just going to guess, well, first I'll blend the 1 cup of water with the 2 cups. This is a stronger batch going into the big container. But I'm going to quickly pulse it, then I'm going to very quickly introduce the live culture into the new batch. Now remember, this is all warm. I'm putting in what I'm estimating is about 8 ounces. It's really not even necessary to measure that. So that's, I'd say, the equivalent of 1 of the small cups. As long as it's active culture and plain, you've got a perfect starter. So I'm just going to quickly pulse this, just so that it's all blended in. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our live culture into the rest of the batch. And that's it. What we're going to do next is gently stir the whole thing so that you've got culture throughout the batch. Now let me say at this point, I like to make a gallon at a time. You can make this a much smaller batch if you want, and you can put it in canning jars individually. What we've found with the canning jars is that you still have to deal with the foam. So I do store mine in canning jars, but what I do is spoon it into the jar after this whole big batch is cultured. Let's go over to the water bath. Well, now we have our container within the water bath. This is the 3rd thing I'd like to talk about, and that is the most amazing, predictable tool to use in culturing yogurt is a Sous-Vide cooker. These are superior because you can control exactly what temperature to culture your yogurt. Now on the internet it says between 108 and 112 degrees is the ideal. We've set ours for 110. When yogurt originally started being cultured centuries ago, the expert Middle Eastern cooks who learned this technique were very comfortable with leaving it out at room temperature. Usually they were in the desert and the warmth was all around them. We have to be more careful to keep drafts and fluctuations in temperature from our live culture. Do not be afraid of the time that it will take for your yogurt to culture. It seems like we're tied to the refrigerator and we want to get things in the fridge as soon as possible after we've purchased them. But there's a whole perspective about the safe handling of milk. Yogurt does need to be at a lower temperature than you can culture in the fridge. So that system's out. My advice is try not to think about it, just be confident. Everything is clean in here and it will be exactly the same temperature for the next about 12 hours. So I will see you again in 12 hours. I'm back after a minute. I forgot this container is floating, and we want to be sure that all of the milk is below the water line. So we have parts of our old Jenner barbecue stove that make great weights. They're a little bit ugly, but they do the job. And so now all of our milk is below the water line. You can use any heavy thing you have in your kitchen, or you could use a bowl and fill it up with water. Just the idea is you want that to be all equally available to the heat distribution process. So this is what the Sous-Vide does to maintain temperature in the whole bath. The water is swirling around, and we cutely put some little bubbles in there so that you can see the water is being turned around. There's a white dot and some black specks. See you in 12 hours. It's been 10 hours since we first put our incubator to bath in that warm 110 degree temperature. So now we're going to test it to see if it's finished. It might take a little bit longer, but look, this is a good sign. Look how thick that is. It's not even collapsing. And I'll take a spoon and do a spoon test. Look how lovely that is, silky and perfect. 10 hours into our culturing, we are ready to just now spoon the yogurt into individual serving cups. I like to use these plastic lids, but I don't trust them. So I use those for our first few breakfasts. And then I'll use the standard metal lid and ring for the other ones. It does not take very long to fill these. And I'm not sure that there's any advantage to having the culture in the individual jar, because this nice big gallon is so convenient to work with. You notice that it took me under a half an hour, even with my explanations, to get this started. There's been no additional time until now for me to, there's nothing to tend. It sat there all day. We entertained family and spent a nice day doing other things while this culture was still working for us. And now this is thick enough that I feel like it is just like Greek yogurt. And the reason I think that it acts like Greek yogurt is because it has a high concentration of milk solids to liquid, to that water, that warm water that we mix the powdered milk with. I really think this is a wonderful system. I underestimated the yield from our gallon of yogurt. We ended up with 20 jars of yogurt. The last while, I think if we'd left it in an hour or two longer, it would have been completely firm, but we did have to drain some water off of the last parts of the yogurt. But by and large, we've now produced 10 days of eating yogurt sometime this month in some form or other for two of us. Definitely worth the about half hour total that it's taken us to culture and put away the yogurt. To make the yogurt pops, we have put 4 cups of our cultured yogurt into the blender with about a half a cup of sugar. We're now adding berries. This is a mixed berry from Costco, but any kind of fruit will do at this point, frozen or not. Apricots are really good in this, and so are fresh raspberries. So you put the lid on it and I like to blend it. My blender has a milkshake feature, so I put it on milkshake. Pouring it into little cups and inserting spoons, we have our yogurt pop. So now we have our yogurt pops all ready to go in the freezer. We rebag later into Ziploc bags because it does start to dry out on the exposed side if you leave them in too long. But these little cups, you warm them up in your hands just a little bit, they pop right out. And then if it starts falling off the spoon, which rarely happens, you've still got the cup to put the icy chunk back in and eat it with the spoon. So it's a good little delivery system.